Hey, thanks for tuning in to All Things Division 3 Soccer. As you know, I sometimes dabble in other things than Division 3 and I call it Injured Time. And on this episode of Injured Time is a part of my interview with Peter Wilt, man who has the depth and breadth of soccer knowledge that very few have. Turned out to be a very long Friday night where we just sat and talked about a whole range of issues. And because it was so long, I decided I would create multiple videos. And this is one of those parts of the interview. Hope you enjoy it. You could look for the full interview later on. I'll put out the whole thing. But until then, hope you enjoy this interview with Peter Wilt.
Yeah, I think I certainly learned it over time, listening to people. I mean, I remember when I was in Minnesota with the Thunder, when the internet was just starting and being able to communicate with fans that way, and then also in person at games, standing with fans and listening to them and seeing what they want and then being able to help them get it. And then with the Chicago Fires, where it really, I think, cemented it in my head. And well, it goes back to a forum that's near and dear to your heart as well, and that's Big Soccer.
Yeah, totally.
Big Soccer
Transformational, by
is,
the way. My thesis, one of the most transformational platforms out there. But anyhow,
no, you're exactly right. It was a community
yeah,
at a time when soccer fans were not normalized,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's where they could find their own kind
yeah.
and communicate. And I was one of the few executives who dove into the
Yes,
dangerous
yes,
water to communicate
yeah,
with the fans. And I was smart enough and had common sense enough to listen,
yeah.
not just talk at them.
That I remember you would be on there. You would post occasionally on there on Big Soccer, and like I said, probably one of the more transformational platforms for soccer in general. Like you said, because that was the place where us abnormal people could be normal, and not, yeah, yeah. Everyone had their hills they were going to die on and all that kind of stuff, and the banter was sometimes outrageous. But I knew I'd be arguing with a soccer guy and not somebody who'd never followed the game, right?
I actually went on Big Soccer 2 days ago for the first time, 8 years?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I came across one of the old Q&A threads with
Uh
me.
huh.
And Fire fans started a Q&A thread for me where they could just go on and post questions just for me.
Yeah.
And most of them were about the team and technical issues or customer service issues. But they would also ask me, I mean, they got to know my
Yeah.
personality a bit and they'd ask off the wall questions about Monty Python or whatever. And there were so many of these that it, I think there's a limit of 400 posts per thread. And so when a thread closed because it got to the 400 limit, they would open up another one. Well, it got to, I believe, Q&A for Peter Wilt version 6.0.
Holy
So that
smokes.
means there's over
Yeah.
2,400 comments or questions or answers over time. And I was going through it the other day, looking at it, and I was giving in-depth answers to a lot of these
Yeah.
questions, and to the serious
Yeah.
questions, and to the snarky ones. I would give a snarky
Answer.
answer,
Yeah.
and I think they appreciated that, and I certainly appreciated the passion and the knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think too many soccer executives
Dismissed.
underestimate,
Yeah.
dismiss
Yep.
the knowledge
Yeah.
and passion
Yeah.
of soccer fans. There was this Fire season ticket holder our first couple of years named Joel Feinlieb. Joel Feinlieb. He later moved to Washington, D.C. He was a college professor. I think he was a professor at University of Chicago.
Hmm.
If not, maybe as a doctoral student or something. But man, did he know soccer. I mean, he would send me scouting reports of our team as well as other teams. I'd share them with Bob, and Bob took them
Yeah.
seriously, and it was brilliant. And then he'd post things also on Big Soccer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a wonderful community, and it's morphed obviously into social media,
Yeah.
and where it's unfortunately it's dumbed
Yeah.
down, and it's
Yeah.
um,
140 characters type thing. Yeah. Yeah.
140 characters, and also it's more about anger
Yeah.
and
Yes.
self
Yeah.
righteousness and
Yeah.
such.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pretty
Yeah.
special place. Reddit is probably a better comparison to what Big Soccer
Big
is.
soccer.
Obviously,
That I agree. Just in general, I would agree with it. So just two things popped in my head. I don't know if you're a fan of Counting Crows, the band, the Counting Crows. Okay, well, their lead singer Adam Duritz actually, when they first, before they became really popular, the internet was just coming, and same thing. He had found a place where fans would talk about his band, and he actually was one of the first people in music industry that took that avenue seriously and still talks about it to this day about interacting with his own fans, what songs they like, what they don't like, what do they want to see in a concert, all these different things, taking this input where he recalls it as a very special time because it was almost unadulterated, right? Like where you don't have that anymore, where we could sit and talk about anything. And like you said, social media and a lot of things have sort of devolved into anger, self-righteousness. I know, you don't. I'm smart, you're dumb. Like, and
yeah.
big soccer was there was a little bit of that. Don't get me wrong, but that was very much very much not that for the longest time.
Well, it was also policed with yellow
Yeah,
cards and red
yeah,
cards.
yeah. There was,
We had
yeah,
moderators that would control it,
yeah,
and there were, and I got quite a bit, I'll say, success uh, with doing that. I mean, we built a passionate fan base with the Fire in those early years, in large part, I think, because of
yeah,
that. And there are other soccer executives in MLS that tried to replicate that and didn't
yeah,
succeed. I know Kevin tried, Kevin Payne
yeah.
tried, Merritt Paulson
Oh,
tried
yeah,
in Portland, and it made me realize that it's not as easy as it
no,
sounds. You need to have a certain humility
yeah, yeah,
and respect,
yeah.
and
Well, that's it. I think that's what it comes down to, right? I think ultimately you have to accept the fact that it doesn't matter your position. You don't know everything, right? Like you have to accept that somebody else might know something or have a better idea about something, and have yeah,
absolutely.
and
I
respect that
tried to
person.
use it. I tried to use it to inform and clarify,
Yeah,
um, as opposed to posting opinions.
yeah,
I mean, if they asked me my opinion, I would give it to them, but I would always couch it
yeah,
as this is my personal
yeah,
opinion, not my way or the highway. But the clarifying part was really important to me because people are semi-informed, and oftentimes will be misinformed, and will repeat wrong information on a forum, and it gets a life of its own.
yeah,
So I was coming from a position of internal knowledge, and I'm on factual stuff internally with the team. I was able to clarify and correct, and then inform. I treated them as being like
yeah,
insiders,
yeah.
and I could give them some inside information. Um, I think maybe my most successful post I ever put on there was um, a week or so after I traded Peter Novak at the end of Peter's
Ooh, yeah,
career. It was the off season between 2002 and 2003. We had the worst season under Bob Bradley. I don't even think we made the playoffs that year. And Bob left. I traded him
Yeah.
to New Jersey at his request, and for Rodrigo Faria and a first round draft pick. And Bob thought I ripped them off. I said, "Well, fine, I'll take you back." And so lost Bob, traded away Josh Wolf to Kansas City for I think a draft pick. Traded away Christo Stoichkov. Traded away Dima Kovalenko, essentially with Christo. Traded away. Let's see. So it was
You basically traded away the team that got you the success.
Christo,
Yeah.
Dima, Josh, and then Peter Novak,
Yeah.
captain of the team, the heart of the team, the face
Yeah.
of the team. And I told Peter, I said, we don't have the money in our budget for you. We were $1 million over the salary budget, which was only like
5 million or something.
2.5 million at the time. And we're at 3.5 million, it was almost 50% over
Yeah.
from a percentage standpoint. And so I told Peter, I said, I can bring it back, but only pay you $50,000. I said, it's an insult. I'm not saying you're worth $50,000. I was just saying, given the choices, this is where you go. And I could trade him to either New England or Columbus. They were both offering me a draft pick. It wasn't a great draft pick. And so I told Peter, I said, I think Columbus's offer is a little bit better, but you tell me, where do you want to go? And I'll take that offer. And he said, my wife doesn't want to live in Columbus. I'll go to New England. I said, okay. So it was Todd Smith or whoever the GM was, and I called him up. I said, you got a deal. You have Peter. He said, great. They put out the press release, fire trades Peter Novak to New England, and the shit hit the fan. Because this was after Josh Wolf. It was after Christos Stoichkov. It was after Dima Kovalenko, after Bob Bradley. It was like, oh my God. And they were calling for my head, and coming off a bad year.
Yeah.
And so I took the barbs for a while, and it was nasty. It was tough. The emails that I was getting, the posts on BigSoccer, the phone calls I was getting. And so I sat down and I became transparent. I basically, I don't want to say opened the books, but I put the fans in my shoes.
Yeah.
And I said, this is what we faced in this off season. And I said, we're $1 million over the budget. Our options were to keep all of those older players and lose Chris Armas, Jesse Marsh, C.J. Brown, Ante Razov, Zach Thornton,
Guys
these
on
younger,
the younger players
who were coming into their own, who were at lower budget, right? Lower contracts. And I laid it all out, and I said in that letter, trading Peter Novak was the most difficult professional task I've ever had. And I said I had tears when I did it, and it was the truth. Yeah. And when I sent it as an email to season ticket holders, and then posted it on BigSoccer. And for the most part, it was the most positive response I've ever gotten to any communication I've ever put out there. People were like, "Oh,
now I
get it."
Yeah.
And I can't believe this general manager is opening up his process, how he came to these decisions, and how he felt he was in a no-win situation, but he was making blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Except the last paragraph I wrote, I regret writing it, even though it may be true. I wrote, and for those who choose not to support us going forward because we traded Peter Novak, it means you were never fans of the Chicago Fire. You were fans of Peter Novak.
Yeah, that's a little
Yeah, harsh.
harsh.
It was
Yeah,
harsh.
yeah,
There may be some truth in
yeah,
it.
yeah. But that's
I,
not. That's one of the things that you. That's the unspoken part you leave unspoken, right?
yeah.
Or you
Well,
want to.
and it came back to bite me. I don't know, 10 years later, 15 years later. As you may know, I'm a big Green Bay Packers
Mm-hmm.
fan, and I was a big Brett Favre fan.
Mm-hmm.
And when Brett Favre was traded to the New York Jets, it was a very contentious time, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, all the stuff. And at the time he was traded to the Jets, something like, I don't know, 60% of Packer fans actually took Brett Favre's side
Mm-hmm.
against Ted Thompson, the GM. As time went on, that percentage went down, down, down,
Yeah.
down. When the next year he went to the Minnesota Vikings, it
Yeah.
was down to like 2%. Was still on Brett Favre's side. I, for the record, I was part of that 2%.
2%. You went down with the
So
ship, in other words.
I did, yeah. And literally went down because in '97, no, I don't know what year it was. No, it would have been later. Um, uh, Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I was not a Packer fan that year.
Yeah. Wow.
It hurt. It hurt. But I did the exact same thing. It turned out I wasn't a Packer fan. I was a Brett Favre fan.
Did you burn your own Did you burn your Packers gear that year?
No,
No,
it
you
didn't go
didn't. You
that
didn't
far.
go.
But I did get a Jets Brett Favre
You
jersey,
did.
and then later I got a Vikings Brett Favre
Nice.
jersey.
Nice. All
So
right. All
yeah,
right. Hey, you know
shame on
what?
me.
It's interesting that you say that because I don't know if I'd like to think you remember this because I just dug it out when you said you would agree to do this. I'm like, oh my God, I got to do so much reading. In 2009, you wrote an article or something for Medium called How to Run a Soccer Club. And you listed out 9 or 10 bullets of.
Oh, okay. So I wrote this originally for Tom Dunmore's Pitch Invasion, which was a great long form soccer blog. And I was one of many contributors, but I wrote a blog a week, a post a week for almost a full year. So there's more than 40 of these that I wrote. The first one I wrote was something like the 10 pillars of successful soccer management. And it was rewritten at different times as in probably different numbers. And I think you're referring to one version of it that ended up on Medium. But yes, so
One of the bullets. I mean, first is I hear you talk, and then I read this. I hear you talk, and it is everything you're saying still applies, right? The number one was fans are in charge. We all sell, that's the era I grew up. I was a fan. I'm selling the game like the guy who's selling the tickets, like you are the team, what have you. Target the sales and marketing efforts, which again, Forward Madison, I'm like, that's it to a T. Build and retain good staff. The one you just mentioned and why I bring it up, transparency is generally good, was one of the sections about it's always better to come clean than it is to.
yeah, I've got a couple caveats on that.
Of
I mean,
course, yeah.
you don't be transparent about personnel
Yeah,
issues
yeah, yeah,
and certain financial
yeah. Yeah,
issues.
absolutely.
But in general, yep, I'm a big believer in that. I mean, it also shows humility and it explains, it clarifies.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not always going to make decisions that people agree with on the surface, but if they see the reasoning behind
Yeah.
the decisions, even if they don't agree with the decisions, they'll have a greater respect or
Yeah,
understanding
yeah.
for it.
They still might have taken a different tack, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
because everyone comes to their own conclusions, but at
right.
least they would be a little. What we talked about quite a bit, make fanatics or fan addicts not spectators, which I thought I saw that and it was like that brilliant.
It's about creating
Yeah.
emotional connections.
Yep.
And there's a spectrum, right? I think you introduce a person to the sport as a spectator on one end of the spectrum, and it's your job to move them along the
Yeah.
spectrum towards the other end.
Yeah.
You're not going to get them all to become
Yep.
evangelists,
Yeah.
uh, but hopefully they at least become advocates
Yeah.
for the sport and your team.
Yeah. Can I ask you? Oh, you also said create emotional connections, which again, what you were talking about, and then the last piece, which with you has always been the case, and which is why sometimes when I sort of watch MLS or the talking heads on MLS, the last bit was be authentic, and because I think there's an authenticity gap currently. I'm not just speaking MLS, but I think by and large sports have become that way. Um,
Yeah, it becomes too corporate. And
yeah.
in the early days of MLS, when I was hired by Chicago MLS before we
Mm-hmm.
were the Fire, I went around to the 10 existing teams to learn best practices. And sadly, I learned from 9 of the teams kind of what not to do. I mean, I shouldn't throw LA in that bucket because LA was doing some good things
Yeah.
too. But really, the exception was DC United.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin
Kevin
Payne,
Payne.
Bruce Arena, they got
Yeah.
it. Stephen Goff, I mean, Jamie O'Connor, Michael Hitchcock was there.
Yeah.
I mean, they were authentic
Yeah.
and they understood about the traditional part of
Yeah.
soccer
Well,
support.
DC United,
Uh,
the name alone, right? Like,
well,
you
it
know,
wasn't
it
supposed to
was,
be United. It was supposed to be the Washington Revolution.
yeah,
And Kevin was like,
no way.
no.
Yeah,
So he wanted United,
yeah,
uniting the
yeah.
community, blah blah blah. And so they
But he was
Adidas.
derided, or there were people who derided the decision to go with DC United because it was not an American named club. They wanted Metro Stars. They want you right, like all that kind of stuff. The
Clash,
Clash.
mutiny.
Yeah, yeah. They wanted those things,
So,
not anyhow.
yeah. So Revolution, obviously,
Yeah,
Adidas had them. Reebok had New England. So I
yeah.
don't know how Revolution ended up there because the suppliers, apparel suppliers, were responsible for the identities of the teams.
Mm-hmm.
Nike, because they put in the most money, had the rights to name 6 of the original 12 teams.
Yeah.
And out of those 6 identities that Nike came up with, you know how many exist today?
I don't. I don't even. Oh my gosh. One
Yes.
Galaxy.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. LA
Nike
Galaxy.
came up with
But the
Galaxy.
logos all changed, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
and that's going to happen.
yeah.
But the names they came up with that didn't stay included Metro Stars,
Metro
of course.
Stars,
Let's see if we can get them all. The Mutiny. I'll
Mutiny,
let you do it. I gave you 2.
Clash,
There's 3 more.
Clash.
Yeah.
The Wiz. Well, it went Wiz
No, that was
Wizards.
that was
That was
Adidas.
Adidas. Uh, going up and down the coast. Revolution was Reebok. That I remember. Oh my gosh. Of the 10 or the 9, 10,
Of the 12.
12 of the original 12. Said the Mutiny. Was Miami part of that?
They were Umbro.
Umbro. That's the hard part. So DC was DC. That's that. New England. Metro Stars. Cleveland. Was it the Crew? Crew would have to be
Adidas.
Adidas. I'm calling all the Adidas ones. Um, not Chicago. The LA Clash. I'm drawing blanks here. I'm drawing blanks. That's 3.
So Dallas.
Dallas, the Burn. Yeah.
And don't forget your Chicago Rhythm.
Chicago. Oh my gosh.
We were supposed to be Chicago Rhythm.
Ah,
That's what Nike had us as. And Mr. Anschutz and I said,
No
no,
way.
no,
No
we're not going to
way.
do it.
Even
They
Phil
actually,
Anschutz weighed in on that one?
oh yeah. So he actually ended up, he actually, because Nike was not happy about
Yeah.
this. They had put a lot of work into the design of
Uh-huh.
it, and they had already gotten started on uniforms. And they told us if we change identities now, we just got to take uniforms off the rack,
Yeah.
and that we could for our first team,
Yeah.
and that we could not have replicas
Yeah.
the first year. Um, have you ever seen the Chicago Rhythm logo?
I I do not. I did to me when the rhythm was like all the pre we hear out in Chicago that they're going to be the rhythm, right? Like it wasn't ever that official.
You ready?
Yeah. This is am I my eyes going to bleed? Oh my gosh. It looks like the Allen I. Rothenberg original trophy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the colors aren't coming through on the screen. It's cobalt blue and neon yellow.
Yeah. Very Chicago-y.
Yes, exactly. It's
That says
yeah.
Chicago all the way, doesn't it?
Let's see. Maybe this one is, but nah,
Yeah.
it still can't really see
It
it.
still looks like it. Oh, there it is. It still looks like the Allen I. Rothenberg trophy, the original.
It does. You're right. You're right.
What are those
So
supposed to be, by the way?
serpents
Serpents.
or snakes, which lived to fight another day with U.S. national team as "Don't Tread on
Don't tread
Me." I
on me.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Why the snakes in Chicago? Is there and how does that have to do with rhythm?
Why are there bats in Tampa?
Somebody made a PowerPoint presentation, put a lot of time into it, and was like, "There are bats in Tampa, whether we like it or not." That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, can I ask you of the list that we sort of that you wrote about? Does any of that change in your mind?
I don't believe so. I mean, I look at that list maybe once a year or so,
Hmm.
but I probably don't have it all memorized, so I couldn't tell you for sure. Um,
But I mean
I will tell
the
you when.
general feel of it, the general. This is the
Oh
general
yeah, no,
gist
no.
of what we're
I think
doing.
it's timeless.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's. I mean, there's certainly different
yeah,
technologies come into play and such, but I think the concepts are the same. And the transparency is not for me. It's not just with the public. It's
hmm
obviously an important part of it, but also internally with your staff.
yeah,
And you need to empower your staff and let them in on what your vision is and how you plan to get there and why you're making these decisions. So
yeah,
they're part of the process.
yeah.
It'll make them feel more engaged, more involved, and desire to work harder and stay with you longer.